Welcome back, Shop Rats. Today we're going to cover the subject of automotive conservation. I'm not exactly sure how long that term has been around in relationship to automotive stuff, but I thought it was worth talking about. It's a subject that many of us may not have even heard of. Let's get into it. It's a Talk About It Tuesday. I'm Mike.
This is My Cars Shop.
I think we're familiar with the term conservation when it comes to natural resources and things like that. In fact, the state of Michigan has a Department of Conservation, and there might even be one of those at the federal level. I'm not totally sure, but we all have heard that term. That term can also apply to historical things, conserving history, that kind of thing. So, it basically means to um, preserve something as much intact as possible without modifying it or whatever, to preserve it historically or to preserve it um, intact as much as possible. So when we think about conservation, Michigan has a conservation department. I already said that. It's to be very conservative with what we do with something. I don't know exactly when I ran into this term when it comes to automotive stuff. It's not a term that I use. It's 4+ decades of being um, involved with cars and restoration and preservation, fabrication, and more, as the title of the channel basically says. Um, Conservation has just not been in my wheelhouse, but it definitely is a thing and it definitely has a place, and I think it's worth talking about. As I have run across the term over the years, the thing that I see overarching, and again, it's not popular, uh, at least in the realm of what I deal with in automotive stuff, but the overarching thought with automotive conservation is it is about maintaining the historical integrity of something. That doesn't mean restoring it back to what it was originally, but rather um, keeping it preserved as found as an old thing and trying to improve it without modifying it or changing it. And that's a lot of gray areas, of course. Like if you had an antique car like the Oakland, for example, and you were going to make a static preservation, conservation unit of that car, and it had a big rusty spot, conservation might allow you to fix that spot in that car as much as possible to maintain its integrity so it doesn't deteriorate anymore. And it would have to be well documented and things like that according to the rules. Whoever writes those, I don't know. But the goal of conservation is not to get the thing going again and start using it. And I think that's the biggest distinction that I can see in my own mind between what I consider to be true preservation, like what we are doing with the Oakland. Maybe that's a resto preservation rather than a resto mod. It's definitely not a restoration. All we're doing with the Oakland is we are trying to preserve it as a survivor car, but be able to use it, enjoy it, and drive it. So we're upgrading things as we go. We replaced the factory oil filter, which was a disposable unit, with a Fram style oil filter with a cartridge, so that we could replace that cartridge in there. We've done some other things along the way with the car. Of course, we put an electronic uh, backup camera on it because the rear visibility is not very good. We put a modern we put a modern temperature gauge in it because if we're going to preserve it, then we really need to have our finger on the pulse of that car that's almost 100 years old. God knows what was done to that motor. We know what's in it because we had it apart. But over the years, we're just trying to keep a real strong finger on the pulse of it so that we don't damage it further or damage it. I guess can't say further. It's not damaged, but you know what I'm saying. And a conservation approach to that car wouldn't be doing any of that because the whole goal of it, while it may run or it may not, the whole goal of it isn't to make it a car that you're going to drive and enjoy. as much as I hate the word, and I've hated it ever since I first heard it. I never liked it. It just didn't resonate with me. In many ways, a conservation effort would be trying to preserve the patina. That's the word I don't like. I don't like the word patina, but I get it. It's a term, and that's what's commonly acceptable. But preserving the original appearance of that car, trying to improve the appearance of that car as much as possible without going through and repainting and things like that. So we're, that's part of conservation can be um, stopping the deterioration, improving the look as much as possible, and trying to make a good representation of what that vehicle was like around the time that it was parked or around the time that it was discovered. And I think that's where the word conservation really does make a lot of sense, because you're taking a very conservative approach to the project. You're not going deep. You're not doing a frame off. You're not going, diving deep down into the dark rabbit hole of trying to make every single thing factory original perfect. You're letting it be as an historical artifact exactly what it is, and doing whatever you can do very conservatively to keep that thing intact as is. So it really is a minimalist approach to the project. And I think it has its place. Um, I personally want to be able to enjoy the things that I have. I can't fathom what car. Okay, here's a scenario. Maybe, probably not. But let's just play this one out. Unearthed in a barn 4 miles from, I'm making this up. Unearthed 4 miles from here in a barn is a 1970 Challenger 426 Hemi car, completely original, never been restored. It's got some aging stuff that's happened to it, but the car is it's the biggest survivor car ever found. I'm making this up, okay? So don't beat me up on this. So we get it here and we bring it in and we conservatively start cleaning it up, seeing what it takes. It's got all the original plug wires on it, yet they look intact. Everything is there. And so our approach to it is we're not going to get it running. We want to preserve it as a museum piece. We're going to do that as conservatively as possible. And then we're going to donate it to the Mopar Museum down in Auburn Hills. Not going to do any of that stuff. But it's a conservative approach. You want to conserve that car rather than restore that car. So if you think about preserving means preventing from future deterioration. Conserving means keeping it intact. Yes, preservation is part of that, but it's taking that minimalist approach. So I guess it kind of makes sense. Now, I admit, I don't know of anybody off the top of my head who does automotive conservation. Like I said, I drop it in the comments down there. Tell me if that's something that you've run into before. It's always been one of those things where I get it, but I don't get it. I don't know why. If you have a rocking chair, if you have an old building, um, something of great historic significance, I suppose I can see it. But cars to me are kind of different, because these things were designed to park your butt in and take you somewhere. And that can be a very enjoyable experience. Why would you want to have a shop full of static model conservative cars that, I suppose, if you enjoy that, and as I think about it, I can think of about 4 places around here where there are garage loads of muscle cars that haven't been run since the 70s or the 80s, and they're just kind of sitting there. I won't say they're rotting away, but they certainly aren't getting any better. So, and if that's the way you enjoy it, that's fine. I'm not here to criticize. But overall, cars are created to go someplace and take us someplace. I don't know. I've struggled to completely understand the mindset. I've struggled to come up with the perfect scenario of something that maybe is just so highly valuable you don't ever want to run it. I don't know, first thing that popped into my head as I'm talking was maybe Henry Ford's very, 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 very first car, which could be at Henry Ford Museum for all I know. I've been there for 10 or 15 years. But the very first car that he put together, maybe we don't even want to run it because we know if we ran it, the metal is so fatigued it would probably break and blow apart and the rods would come out of it. And we just want to do a conservation on that car and put it there for people to enjoy. Maybe. To me, I don't know. But anyway, that was today's subject. It's not something I have exhaustive information on, but I thought it was an interesting discussion starter for sure. And as you drop your comments down there, and if you have sources to point me to, I'll circle back around to this one again. I really appreciate you being here. Talk About It Tuesdays are just me flapping my gums about whatever I happen to be thinking about, and automotive conservation was the subject today. All right, that's going to do it for this one. We'll catch you on the next one.